Duck population numbers, overall abundance is down right now. Even 10 years ago, we were up at 10 million ducks in the population, and now we're down to 5.5 million. So we're down a good bit. Lots of things driving that. So our role down here is to make sure that we're providing healthy habitat where they can get the nutrition and nutrients they need.
Welcome to the Arkansas Food, Farms, and Forests podcast, the podcast bringing you the latest on food, fiber, and forestry research from the Arkansas Agricultural Experiment Station, the research arm of the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture.
Welcome to Food, Farms, and Forests. I'm Jennifer Fouch. Today we are learning about research around waterfowl, more specifically mallard or wild duck. With duck hunting season coming up in November and December in Arkansas, no better time than now to discuss this topic, and no one better to do it than the expert. We are joined by Dr. Doug Osborne, a professor at the College of Forestry, Agriculture, and Natural Resources at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. Dr. Osborne, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show. I look forward to talking to you.
I know you have several research papers going on right now, and I want to highlight some of those and their significance. We were talking earlier, and you said currently you're watching out for what you call the Halloween ducks, Halloween mallards. Can you explain what those are and what that is part of?
Yes, I like the Halloween ducks. So listen, we, in Arkansas here, we're they're migratory. Waterfowl mallards are migratory, and so they spent the entire summer up in the prairies, in the prairie wetlands of the United States and Canada, and so it's fall, and so their resources are going to get limited at some point. Their water up north will freeze, and so they need to migrate to survive the winter. And so we're dealing with migratory birds that typically, the mallards, we sort of call this kind of first group of mallards that typically show up, the Halloween mallards, because it's almost like clockwork. I was actually expecting, last night was a full moon, and then Wednesday night we had that sort of cold front that pushed through and some heavy winds, and I thought maybe even as early as this weekend we might see some piles of mallards around behind that full moon and that cold front. I haven't seen yet any of those large groups of birds, but it's not quite Halloween yet. So, but we'll see. They should be showing up pretty soon, and that'll start off our trapping season. We'll get about 10 or 12 days of trapping and capture to mark these birds before our hunting season starts. We got a short window of time to catch some birds, to put some of the trackers on it that we attach to them, so that we can watch their movements during winter. And of course, that operation will have to shut down 10 days before the start of our hunting season.
I like that you mentioned full moon, cold front, and wind. So those are some of the things that would impact their migration and their path and when they would be here. Some of the signs you watch out for.
Yeah, 20 years ago when I was a kid, you want to go duck hunting in the worst weather. With those cold fronts, you expect to see new birds. But I will probably provide a spoiler by saying that patterns of waterfowl and their migration and the behaviors of these ducks has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And so sometimes now when we get a cold front and we expect to see new ducks, and we're like waiting for them. Good thing we're not holding our breath, because sometimes they don't show up. And so sometimes these fronts that we expect to push new birds don't actually push new birds. And so there's a lot of behavioral ecology of the species has changed through time, because a lot of things, weather, when it gets cold up north, it doesn't stay as cold as long, right? And so the ducks can hunker down and just not eat and conserve energy for a couple of days. And then they know it's going to warm back up and their food will be available. And then they can, energetically, it's more costly for that duck to migrate than it is just to hunker down and not eat for a couple of days. So there's that sort of behavioral mechanisms that birds are dealing with and coping with changes in weather conditions and such. So nonetheless, migration is on right now. We have a lot of ducks here, mostly smaller species of dabbling ducks like the teal and the pintails, are just known to be early migrants. And the white-fronted geese, we're starting to see quite a few of the white-fronted geese, and they nest in the Arctic tundra, and so they come here during the winter. So they're starting to show up too in pretty good numbers.
You mentioned those changes and weather changes and winters not being as long. Have you noticed over the years then? I know you said we're still getting ducks and we have some here and coming, but are the numbers decreasing over the years compared to 20 years ago?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So I would say that duck population numbers, overall abundance is down right now compared to long term. We're kind of in a low trough. Even 10 years ago, we were up at 10 million ducks in the population, and now we're down to 5.5 million. So we're down a good bit. Lots of things driving that. Probably primarily weather and habitat related on the breeding grounds. That's the most important driver. When the prairie ponds are dry and they don't have water, and the temperatures in prairie Canada the growing season's getting longer and the temperatures are getting warmer, it allows the farmers to just till a little bit more land, and they got a little bit more time to work their ground. And so we're losing wetlands. So there's a lot of confounding factors. One certainly being weather and land use related, but overall, to answer your question, populations are down. They're very cyclic, and so we hope that our low is at its low right now, and it's going to come back very soon. And so we'll see how that goes.
Okay, speaking of coming back, is that what part of your research is for? Is there anything we can do as a population, duck hunters, as citizens, and as people we're living here in these areas, that we want the natural migration to continue? Is there anything we can do to help that, or is there anything we should do to help that? And then how your research comes in to answer those questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I am not a population ecologist. I don't study the numbers and how, growth rates and stuff like that are, but I'm definitely in tune with those things, right? And here in Arkansas, being at sort of the southern range of the sort of core, this is really the Arkansas Delta really is sort of the core, the center, the red spot in the heat map, right, of sort of the historical wintering range for mallards in this flyway. It's a very important region historically. I would tell you that our data, we've been doing a banding project for maybe going on 12 years now in Arkansas. We banded over 45,000, about I'd say over 45,000 mallards in 12 years in Arkansas during the winter, and we do that primarily in February. Beginning to sort of analyze that longer term data set, it's clear that our distribution during winter is shifting north. And so we're seeing a northern shift, and those ducks are just not quite coming down here as far. And it's like statistically, it's like a few degrees, right? But it is slowly creeping further north. And a lot of that is probably driven by the way we manage the Delta, right? And so we have to, down here, our role in waterfowl is making sure they have the very important pieces of the habitat that they need to survive for winter. We need to send these birds back to the prairies next spring very healthy. They need to have extra lipid and protein content stores in their body so they can go back, so the hens can lay nests, and it's a very protein sort of rich, energetically expensive, costly time of year for them is to nest. And so the healthier they are when they go back, the better they are during their reproduction. So our role down here is to make sure that we're providing healthy habitat where they can get the nutrition, the nutrients they need, the energy they need to survive the winter, at least a good portion of them that don't go down by the gun, which is okay. But we got to provide the habitat for them, and so that's what our research is looking at with these transmitters. So we put these little transmitters that are about 20 grams, 18 to 20 grams a piece, and they put them on their back just like you would a backpack. And you got shoulder straps, and these straps go over the duck's body, and it holds on, and it's creating it's recording these GPS locations of where that bird moves during the day. It records elevation, height, altitude when the bird's flying. It records how fast it's flying. It records just a bunch of things. These devices also have what's called accelerometer. It's just kind of like your Fitbit, to where it's like it's measuring XYZ coordinates. So if the bird's tipping down forward, feeding into the water, then you can evaluate what their sort of behaviors are. So it's just an incredible amount of data. But on sort of a broad scale, we can look at how these transmitter marked birds are moving around the delta and what habitats they're using, right? How much time are they spending in various habitats? How much time are they spending in the woods? When they're in the timber, are they in the thicket part of the timber? Are they in the area that has the big, wide open, beautiful trees that have a bunch of red oak acorns? Are they in the opening? Are they in the thicket? Are they in are they on the edge? Are they in the middle? So that gives us a feel for what that bird sort of wants, right? And so when we summarize that, that the type of habitat they're using, how much time they spend in rice fields, how much time are they spending in sort of unmanaged, I guess what we call actively managed moist soil. And so that just tells us, say, if they're spending 50% of the time in the forest during the day and 30% in rice, or 50% at rice, but it's at night, it just gives us that understanding of what they need. That's really sort of the juxt of some of the projects that we're looking at, is understanding sort of the local movements and how different pieces of that landscape, and what's the juxtaposition of those pieces. What is a wetland complex kind of made of? Like, what are the different components in there that's important for ducks? And then we take that information to the refuge and say, hey, they need 10% of their area needs to be sort of sanctuary, unhunted area where they got some place to rest without being ran all over the place. And because that's really important for energy conservation for that bird. And so these sort of local projects, understanding their movement ecology, helps us to inform sort of the management on, public and private wetland areas in the state. And then very fine scale, we got another project that a student's working on, is looking at the fine scale factors in the forest. Like, what is really driving the bird to use the forest? Like, when they're in there, how much of it needs to be, like I said earlier, the thicket. And so really the purpose behind that project is to help us inform restoration, because there's a lot of energy and effort in the state right now for improving forest health and bottomland hardwood systems and wetlands. If we could use the information on how the mallard uses the forest to help inform what that restoration process could potentially look like in the future, or what we need it to look like to benefit the ducks, that's kind of what that fine scale analysis of tree species and composition and structure, really, that's the purpose of that.
Another research project is the Climate Smart Bottomlands, speaking of restoration, which is trying to restore a lot of our wetlands and hardwood. I talked about this on the podcast before, and your name was mentioned as being a part of this huge project, having other researchers involved as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and how in your work specifically contributing to the Climate Smart Bottomlands project?
Yeah, I'm happy to be a part of that project. It's really good effort by Dr. Tian and some foresters there in Monticello and other campuses. We got UAPB, University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, is partners on there, and Texas A&M. And of course, I'm the waterfowl ecologist. So we are trying to go into some pieces of land that the farmers that landowners have had and may have harvested the timber off of it 50 years ago. and it didn't grow back in quality timber, right? So we're trying to go in and we're enhancing those by improving them by plant hooks. And so that's the gist of the sort of overall project. My part is to help inform future plantings of hardwoods. Like there's some models out there that we use in the wildlife world to help us to prioritize our funding. Where do we, if we had funding for restoring bottomland hardwood, where does that money go? Well, there's a prioritization map. It's like a thunderstorm map, a heat map, like the on you see on the news on the Weather Channel, right? And the hottest part in the middle is where we should focus on our restoration. Well, what impact is that going to have if I can go in there under that highest priority area, and if I can restore 1% of the landscape, what impact's that going to have on ducks? If I can restore 5%, 10%, 20, 50% of that priority area, what impact may that have? So our role in this climate project is to put some transmitter devices on ducks and see how they're utilizing the restored forest, the WRP, the tracts of land that have been replanted and to improve the wetland value, right? To sequester carbon, to hold floodwaters, all the things that wetlands do. They also provide habitat for ducks. And so our role is to understand the importance of restoration and young plantings of trees to ducks, and then ultimately sort of do some predictions. If, Bruce Westerman's trillion tree planting effort comes to tuition, where do we plant those trillion trees and what impacts is that going to have if we do? So we're going to model that out and say, hey, if we can restore 10, 5, 10, 15% of the landscape, this is the impact we're going to have on mallards. So that's really sort of the direction and my role in this is to think about sort of providing the information that's going to help us to inform future restoration.
Why is it important that we create these optimal habitats for ducks, whether it is at a level of a duck hunter, for example, or at a bigger scale for the ecosystems that these animals are part of? Why do ducks want, need, and deserve these optimal habitats?
It's an amazing question. So why should we care? Well, first of all, wetlands are incredibly important to cycling excess nutrients on the landscape, so don't end up in our drinking water, right? The wetlands is filtering this surface water, it's filtering the nutrients out of that, so if that water ends up into our aquifer, it's clean. And so wetlands have so many sort of values in terms of holding excess flood water. So we're not flooding towns, we're flooding the wetland holds that excess water. Environmentally, the trees themselves are sequestering carbon, right? To the point as they continue to grow, it will help sort of, right? The forest is obviously going to help offset carbon emissions in our country. So in terms of that, it's a really important function. I mean, the wetland function, so people should care because wetlands are really important and they are, it's probably one of the most threatened. Bottomland hardwood systems themselves, I would say in the Southeast and definitely in Arkansas, is probably the most threatened inland related ecosystem that's going to be impacted by climate. And so these are things that I think this project is helping to get get on the sort of on the forefront of and help to better understand, and hopefully we can help us pick up momentum on restoration of forests. So the ecosystem itself has tons of benefits. One, for humans, of course. Two, for wildlife. And then the human benefit from wildlife, right? And the Arkansas benefit from waterfowl hunting. One, I mean, Arkansas, it's just so embedded in our culture here, in the heritage, right? The hunting heritage here is so strong. I've never been anywhere in my life. It's that the generational love for hunting is so, for waterfowl here is as strong as I've not seen it anywhere else. And so that in itself is really important, I think, to a lot of people and important to me. just the love and passion for the sport and the resource that we have and we're grateful for, but also the economy, right? Like there's so many small rural communities scattered throughout the Delta, Arkansas that are 100% funded on the agriculture side, and then in the winter time, the hunters coming in, spending money at the gas stations and that kind of thing, filling up their boat. Those are important, very important sources of funding for some of these rural communities. So it's very important to the rural community. It's important to our hunter heritage. It's important to the state, and then ultimately it's important for the ducks. Like just our populations are down right now. Like they can rebound quickly, and I hope they will sooner than later. But when they do, we need to make sure we got healthy forests. We need to make sure that we got healthy, flooded ag fields associated with those forests. They can't find all their food in the ag field. Like they can get in there and eat the rice that's on the ground that got spilled and left over from the harvest process. But there's amino acids and other nutritional needs that they can't get out of the crops, that they need to get out of an acorn, or they need to get out of the insects that grow in some of these fields or in the woods. So the diversity in all the different pieces of the landscape that ducks need is really important. Really for acquiring all the nutrients, obviously, that they need to maintain sort of healthy body conditions.
Well, Dr. Osborne, those are all of the questions I had prepared for you. Is there anything else you would like to mention that we didn't get to talk about?
Listen, we may have to reschedule because I'm a professor and they hire me to talk, and so that's what I do. I could fill your 20-minute time slot pretty quick. So I hope that I provided something that's useful for the listeners, and again, I hope they can reach out to me if they got anything else.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge with us here today.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Doug Osborne, a professor at the College of Forestry, Agriculture, and Natural Resources at the University of Arkansas at Monticello, talking to us about his research into waterfowl in Arkansas. Thanks for listening. I'm Jennifer Fouch. Don't forget to subscribe.
The Arkansas Food Farms and Forests podcast is produced by the Arkansas Agricultural Experiment Station, the research arm of the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Visit aaes.uada.edu for more information.